Wisconsin Eye's 2014 election coverage is brought to you by the Wisconsin Hospital Association. For over 90 years, a valued voice for Wisconsin hospitals, supporting high-quality, high-value care in communities like yours.
Wisconsin Eye coverage of the 2014 elections continues with an interview with Andy Craig of Milwaukee. He's a Libertarian candidate for Secretary of State. Andy, welcome to Wisconsin Eye.
Hi, thanks for having me.
And a programming note, Wisconsin Eye appreciates the support of the Wisconsin Hospital Association, which represents more than 139 hospitals and health systems, for making these candidate interviews possible. This is your first run for office, Andy.
That's right.
Then start out by giving us your background.
Sure. Well, as a lot of people guess from the way I talk, I'm not originally from Wisconsin. I moved here in 2011, and what brought me here to Wisconsin is I fell in love and got married and had to go to Iowa to get married, but luckily that's no longer the case. And so that's why I'm here in Milwaukee. And as far as politics, I'm that was my major, was political science, economics. I was on a pre-law track. And thing that piqued my interest in Secretary of State is I saw a report that they're debating getting rid of the office and being kind of a constitutional law. That's something I'm interested in. I was familiar with that's an odd thing to do in most states because the Secretary of State runs elections. But the more I looked into it, I found out that there's a good reason why the Secretary of State does not run elections in Wisconsin. And to find that, you have to look no further than to Florida in the year 2000. That's why you don't let partisan elected officials run elections. And so the more I looked into it, we have a 40-year incumbent whose own party stopped taking him seriously years ago. And I think it's time to just get rid of the office. And it's a needless expense, and that's what I'd work to do.
Your website talks about the Libertarian Party. It says, the third largest political party advocating maximum individual freedom and smaller government. So let's be clear. Are you saying abolish the office of Secretary of State? No, you're not saying that, are you?
No, I am.
Are you? Okay.
And that's something that's been debated for years in Wisconsin.
It has.
You can go back, our newspaper articles for the 50s saying, why are we having an election for this office? Year after year, we've seen unserious candidates from, mainly the Republican Party. Since the fall, it's been the incumbent. Nobody even takes the office seriously. So why are we spending, $70,000 a year on a salary and $500,000 roughly a year on employees for an office whose main, the few remaining tasks are just redundant clerical roles. It's a ceremonial office. It's, we don't have ceremonial nobility in the United States.
So you're running to get rid of the Secretary of State's office,
and that's something that
even though that's a decision that other policymakers
right,
would make.
It would be up to it would have to pass the legislature twice, and then would go to a referendum, and the voters would get to decide on it. It's not something I would just go in and shut down the office.
Right.
But this is something that's been endorsed by Governor Walker and Assembly Speaker Voss in opposition to their own party's nominee, who thinks that the secretary should run elections again. And so that's I think it has the potential to happen, and nothing will make Republicans and Democrats want to get rid of the office quicker than putting a Libertarian in it.
I looked it up. The Secretary of State's office only has 4 employees.
Is that the latest? It keeps going down and down. Last I checked, it was 5, but yeah.
That's according to the Legislative Fiscal Bureau. If you were elected, how would you use those 4 employees, since it's your goal to abolish that office?
One of the things I would do is, most of those 4 employees aren't necessarily all going to go away. It might go down to 2 or 3 when you're talking about the particular tasks they perform. But they would fold into, for example, the person that keeps the list of state land deeds. That can be done by the Department of Administration. Publishing the laws is something that's already been taken, after the incumbent provoked a constitutional crisis. Then that was taken away. Now the Legislative Reference Bureau does it. And that's not a political, that's purely a matter of shuffling paper around. It's not a policy-making role. Right. So, I would seek to obviously reduce costs and prepare for orderly transition.
Is it true, correct me if I'm wrong, one of the jobs is maintaining the official seal? Is that still part of it?
It still is. Funny story there, Doug LaFollette actually lost the seal once and they had to replace it. But yes, that is one of the keeping and affixing the Great Seal of the state of Wisconsin, which gives you some idea of the kind of 19th century relic, the nature of the position.
obviously then, your website indicates that if you hold the position of Secretary of State, you would seek to publicize positions on other issues. You say there are too many important issues that are not being heard in the current two-party debate. Give me some examples of those, please, Andy.
Sure, absolutely. Well, one big issue is ending the war on drugs that's tearing apart our communities, particularly in inner cities Milwaukee and Racine. We need to legalize marijuana and hemp and legalize it now. And this is not just about, people say, oh, people just want to get high. This is about people being thrown in jail and families being torn apart and communities being destroyed, and neither major party is coming forward. Another issue would be the crony capitalism that's running rampant in this state. Through the Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation's got a lot of attention, but it's not just there. It's a tradition going back in both parties where they take tax money and hand it out to private businesses as if they were a venture capital fund. That's a completely inappropriate use. One big issue I would push for is to reform our electoral system. Right now, people go to the voting booth and they have to choose which candidate they vote against, who they dislike the most. I think we should have what's called an instant runoff system, or ranked choice preference, where say there's 4 candidates for the office like there are in this election. Right. You rank them 1, 2, 3, 4, yep. And then the person with the broadest base of support wins. And it gets rid of this lesser of two evils thing that drives the two-party system, which is problematic because of the artificial, unrepresentative coalitions it forces together.
That's the California system, right? Where if you have 2 Democrats, 2 Republicans...
Well, not exactly. The top 2 in California is something different. That's where everybody runs in the same primary, and then only the top 2 go on to the general election. That's not so. That basically kicks third parties off the ballot. Right. It's a big problem. They had a Democratic congressional district where there were 4 Democrats and 2 Republicans running, and even though it was a Democratic-leaning district, the 2 Republicans advanced to the. So that's not top 2, but rank preference or instant runoff voting.
Okay. Well, the goal here, first of all, give us the higher profile that Libertarian candidates are achieving in this election, because you've got candidates for governor and lieutenant governor, right, and all other right, statutory offices.
We have all 5 statewide offices are filled. We've got Tom Nelson's running for Attorney General, Jerry Scheidel for State Treasurer, Robert Burke, no relation to Mary Burke, is running for governor, and Joseph Brose for Lieutenant Governor. And we also have a half-dozen legislative candidates. We've got Leah Vukmir's opponent with Wendy Frederick is a Libertarian. There's no Democrat running in that race. That's something I found quite shocking as we were recruiting and building this team of as many candidates as we could for state legislature, is how many of these state legislative races are uncontested. A third of Wisconsin voters won't get any choice at all for state assembly this year. That's, it sounds more like the Soviet Politburo than an American state legislature. And gerrymandering and electoral rigging, where the party leaders clear the field for their appointed nominee for their special carved-out district, is a huge part of that. And that's something I would seek to raise the profile.
So if you were in the office, you would be talking about these issues?
Absolutely. For example, nonpartisan redistricting. I'm probably the only candidate who has signed a pledge for both Americans for Tax Reform and Common Cause of Wisconsin. The Common Cause clause being nonpartisan redistricting, and the no tax increase pledge.
Neither party, quoting from your website, offers a mixture of economic freedom and individual liberty. Examples of the economic freedom issues that being denied?
Well, a good example is where I live in Milwaukee is the taxi cab industry. There was a lawsuit recently, and this finally been changed, but it's an example that proliferates throughout the state. And that's occupational licensing, where it's capped, and there's only, we're only going to have 10 restaurants or 100 taxi cab drivers or however many in this city. And that is economic protectionism. It protects the special interest, the existing businesses. It creates this artificial monopoly value. If you colluded to create that arrangement in the private market, you'd go to jail for antitrust violations. And so we have the state doing things like that. Another one is the income tax in the state, which is completely unnecessary, and our multi-layered sales tax and the property tax, instead of having a single low fixed tax rate, we have all this manipulation where the tax code is not about raising revenue, it's about encouraging or discouraging behavior. and that's not the purpose of the tax. Ultimately, it would come down to greater respect for property rights, which is part of that broader vision of individual freedom.
Would you get rid of both the income tax and the sales tax if you could?
No, we're advocating a flat sales tax as the single alternative. We would get rid of the income tax and the property tax, because the property tax is extremely regressive. It hits poor people, it hits people on fixed incomes the hardest. And so at the local level, ultimately, our candidate for governor is fond of pointing this out, ultimately all taxes are paid by the consumer at the register. So it'd be better to let people know what they're paying up front so they can make that informed decision about if they're paying too little or too much, and they know how much their neighbor's paying. So that's what's the system we're advocating. And there are also other there's the lottery, there are a few other ways to raise revenue. But a single flat sales tax, kind of along the fair tax proposal, is what we're advocating.
What percentage would your flat tax be? Have you do?
I would have it as low as possible. I believe the calculations on how to do it revenue neutral would be in the range of 20%, which sounds high. I'll grant that it absolutely sounds high, but that's with all the income tax and all the property tax and all the rest of it going away.
All the sales tax, income and property tax go away.
Well, the sales tax. This is the sales tax we would keep.
Yes. Okay.
If you're going to have a tax, then a tax on the transaction, on what's being enabled by the environment that the government is providing, is the closest model to a user fee. And so we would have that. I think we could have it as low as 10% if we cut out a lot of the unnecessary spending, but that's on the spending side of the equation, and ultimately up to the legislature.
What are you finding as you campaign? Is there more interest in a third party, e.g., the Libertarian Party, than you had thought?
Well, absolutely. There's Gallup came out in 2013 last year with a poll that said 60% of Americans, including a majority of both Republicans and Democrats, say that the two-party system is so unrepresentative that a third major party is needed. And I would submit that the Libertarian Party, with its combination of social tolerance and fiscal conservatism and a peaceful anti-war message, is that center possibility. But it takes breaking down the entrenched, all the things that go with the two-party system. As far as response, I had an incredible response. There's been a lot of people turn out at events. I've been asked to come speak at events I would never expect to have been asked to speak at as a Libertarian Party candidate. So.
The high water mark for Libertarians, and correct me if I'm wrong, was when Ed Thompson, Tommy's brother, ran for governor, 2002? 2002,
that's right.
He got 10% of the vote.
Right, almost 11%.
Almost 11%. What's been has the Libertarian Party had ballot status since then, Andy?
Most of the time since then, because of the situation with them deciding after the fact not to count our U.S. Senate results in 2012. We lost it then, and we're going to get it back this year. But most of the time since then, yes, we've had ballot status, and by any measure, we are the largest third party in the country. The Libertarian Party is the only third party that can reasonably expect to put its presidential candidate on all ballots in all 50 states. Okay. We have regular established ballot access in 35 to 40 states, whereas the other, the Green Party, the Constitution Party, are down in the single digits or low double digits range.
It's interesting, though, the November 4 ballot, your name is one of 4.
That's right.
Democrat Doug LaFollette, Republican Julian Bradley, and Jerry Brodsman, the Constitutional Party. Do you want to highlight any differences between you and the other 3, sir?
Well, I touched a little bit on what I disagree with LaFollette and Bradley. As far as the Constitution Party, from what I understand, he's a nice guy, but it's a somewhat misleadingly named party. They're more accurately could be described as a theocratic. Jerry Brodsman is running for Secretary of State on the platform of King James Version only. So that about sums up where I would disagree with him, I suppose. Okay. As I mentioned, Bradley is interesting character, former professional wrestler. Nothing wrong with that.
He believes the office should stay around, and obviously Doug, the incumbent does too.
Right. But Bradley says that he wants to run elections. He this year alone in Illinois, we've seen Republicans send armed thugs to voters' houses to get them to disavow their Libertarian petition signatures. We've seen Republicans commit fraud in Oregon and Ohio, and I could name a dozen other states, in order to keep the Libertarians off the ballot because they think we steal their votes. And now here comes Julian Bradley, a Republican, say, you can trust me to run elections. That there's it's a conflict of interest. Even if there's no impropriety, I don't want to be, as Secretary of State, in the position where a candidate wins by 17 votes, which just happened, supposedly. And I backed one or the other publicly, and so all of a sudden my integrity and the results of the election are cast into doubt because we don't have neutral, nonpartisan officers running the polling places.
Okay. Well, let's end the interview this way. Why don't you give the viewers of this program your elevator speech? They should vote for you for Secretary of State as a Libertarian Party candidate because. Go ahead.
Sure. I would say 2 reasons. One, it's time to have a third party in Wisconsin state government. The Republicans and Democrats have controlled Wisconsin state government for 80 years, and nothing good has come of it. Imagine if your only job replacement could be the person who was fired to bring you in the first place. If it was only back and forth, you probably wouldn't be much competition. And the second reason is I will stop voters from having to waste more time on unserious candidates for this unserious office in the future.
Wow. Okay. Thank you. Andy Craig of Milwaukee is the Libertarian candidate for Secretary of State. Andy, thanks for talking to Wisconsin Eye.
Thanks.
Thank you.